This would be the first step in restoring a republic, which is, after all, simply government by the people, and we are those people. Our government's authority is fundamentally constrained by us. It is constrained by how we choose to submit to its orders, by how completely we embrace its narrative, and by how easily we are convinced of its often perverted logic. America has had a long and vibrant history of ignoring government mandates in favor of justice and harmony and righteousness. I think this is in part due to our Christian heritage, where one humbly renders unto Caesar his, but unto God hers. I was just checking to see if you were listening, and you were very good, very good. Seriously, the ideas that men and women can choose their path and that goodness and mercy are not owned or even understood by the state are powerful foundations of republicanism. The American immigration debate provides a way to think about the current generation of Andrei Herscovicis. In some border states, churches are creating a kind of underground railroad for mothers and fathers about to be separated from their U.S.-born children due to our government's current interest in being seen as tough on illegal immigration. At the same time and in the same places, we have the Minutemen, who voluntarily patrol private and public land along the southern border, raising awareness of laws that the U.S. government has made but, for whatever reason, refuses to enforce. The Minutemen and the safe haven churches disagree on each other's mission. But because they represent people acting without government mandate, they are both held in equally high contempt by the U.S. government. What does this have to do with a restored republic? Here we have simple, principled people who recognize their government is wrong or unwise on this issue or that. Then simply, often secretly, they take positive action to do the right thing. Usually they don't act alone, and they don't have to. That's the funny thing about righteous ideas. They have a vibrancy and a shine we don't find in government legislation or leadership. We can't all run underground railroads or guard the borders in such a direct and immediate way. But more of us can speak out, and I don't mean in front of large groups or at rallies, not that there's anything wrong with that. We can speak out in ways that matter in our own lives and livelihoods. And when we have extremely bad federal policy, we see people in every generation doing just that. The Pentagon Papers were released in early 1971 by Daniel Ellsberg, incidentally with the help of a friend, Tony Russo. These 7,000 pages of incriminating government information given to a media willing at that time to do its job were instrumental in eventually ending the American part of the carnage in Vietnam. Ellsberg's life was made a living hell, his professional reputation ruined, and he and Tony were charged with espionage, theft, and conspiracy. Think about the more current example of the Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo whistleblowers. Because of their courage, the whole country knows what we did and are still doing in our international prison camps to innocent and uncharged people. Former Army Staff Sergeant Samuel Provence was instrumental in exposing the torture that was going on in Abu Ghraib. As a result of his efforts, he writes, "The Army then demoted me, suspended my top secret clearance, and threatened me with 10 years in a military prison if I asked for a court-martial. I was even given a gag order." Former General Janis Karpinski experienced much the same treatment. So did Army Reserve Specialist Joe Darby and Marine Staff Sergeant Jim Massey. Telling the truth about government abuses and illegalities saves lives, but it can be a real career killer. Think about Navy Lieutenant Commander Matthew Diaz, a modern echo of Daniel Ellsberg. His truth-telling was on a topic that 3 years into the Iraq War and the so-called War on Terror, the media was finally ready to use. Commander Diaz, a lawyer posted for 6 months in Guantanamo, Cuba, spent a few minutes at his government computer on a Sunday night in January 2005. He printed off a list of 550 detainees, including their nationalities and other information. He sent this information in the mail to an organization that was at the time unsuccessfully suing the federal government for this information, for releasing the names of uncharged and unrepresented detainees held by the United States government at Gitmo. Diaz was charged with failing to obey a lawful regulation, conduct unbecoming an officer, and wrongfully transmitting classified information. His courts-martial began a few weeks ago, and needless to say, his career as a military lawyer is over. In government service, telling the truth is a rare luxury. It is never the norm. There is always a price paid by the honorable people who follow their conscience and upbringing. Most government employees follow a don't ask, don't tell policy. For every concern about dishonesty and unconstitutional behavior I had in my final year in the Office of the Secretary of Defense in 2002 and 2003, I heard men and women of insightfulness and patriotism voice twice as many such complaints. So where are all these people? They are preserving their careers. And this is done for many reasons, but mainly because they choose to put their lives above the lives of people they don't know and will never meet. And such self-interest is not only understandable, it is fundamental to freedom. But when this self-interest is exercised within the fraudulent economy of government employees and beneficiaries, it becomes the key to tyranny. Here's how it works. George Tenet has recently told us all that in effect, and I quote, well, my paraphrasing quote, "I would have liked to prevent the slaughter of innocent people, ours and theirs, but no one would listen to me anyway, so what would be the point?" Another rube of tyranny is Congressman Dick Durbin. Durbin recently came clean about 2002 and 2003, and I quote, "The information we had in the Intelligence Committee was not the same information being given to the American people. I couldn't believe it. I was angry about it. But frankly, I couldn't do much about it because in the Intelligence Committee, we're sworn to secrecy. We can't walk outside the door and say the statement made yesterday by the White House is in direct contradiction to classified information that's been given to this Congress." Well, at least he was angry about it. George Tenet and Dick Durbin are typical of literally thousands of people in all parts of the Pentagon, in the State Department, in the Department of Energy, in the mainstream media, and in the rest of the U.S. Congress and its extensive staff. Few, if any, stood up with information in time that could have saved lives and prevented a major war and the destruction of a country. The sad thing is, all of these don't ask, don't tell folks actually thought the only country being destroyed by their inaction was Iraq. Was it a law or regulation that reined them in? Fear of retribution? No other possible way of making a living? I think not. I've given it some thought, and from my own experience, the only thing stopping folks from speaking the truth when it would do some good is a cherished personal belief that they have no right to do so. Like ancient Greek slaves, they're not separate in race or creed, in form or intelligence from their masters or any other citizen. Then as now, the masters encourage submission, and these employees willingly agree to be enslaved. In retrospect, what possible harm would have been caused by Durbin or Tenet or Colin Powell from freely acting on the information they had? Think about it. No harm at all, only good, and they would have had their honor and their legacies intact. If government bureaucrats and political appointees were only robots obeying rules 1, 2, and 3, we would not have had this illegal war in Iraq. These laws, paraphrased: first, do no harm through action or inaction. Second, obey orders only if they do no harm through action or inaction. And thirdly, protect oneself if possible, only if still obeying laws 1 and 2. Perhaps a few simple rules for individual behavior would have been far more useful in restoring the Republic than grand governmental models and long, detailed constitutions that few understand or care about. Beyond doing the right thing and speaking the truth early and often with a confident disregard for the immediate consequences, is there anything else we can do to restore the Republic, to contain or destroy the Leviathan? I think there is one more thing we can all do, and this is at once the most difficult and yet also the easiest. We must separate ourselves from this non-Republican government. If you cannot live your values and do your government job at the same time, leave the job. If you wish to pay fewer taxes, then find a way to pay fewer taxes and keep more of your own earnings. This may mean earning less rather than more, living well rather than high on the hog. It means turning away from government service and from the seduction of so-called government benefits, of education, welfare, government lotteries, even government booze and drugs. If you must interface with government, do so as a master, not a slave, and encourage everyone you know to do the same.